Broadcasting from Silicon Valley to around the world, it's The Data Show.
Welcome to The Data Show. Today we're going to review thousands and thousands of datasets available through Snowflake, thanks to Knoema. And my guest today is Charles Poliacof, the CEO of Knoema. That's going to show us how to navigate these datasets, the value of them, and how the incredible wealth of data that we can find here. So welcome, Charles, to the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing awesome, and I'm super excited to be here. Big fan of your show. I've had an opportunity to watch a couple episodes, and I kind of love what you guys are doing here, and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Thank you, Charles. And I'm a big fan of Knoema. Like every day that since Knoema has been made available through Snowflake, I keep discovering new and more datasets that you are making available, and I find it really incredible how everything keeps being available, updated, and you keep incorporating new tables and new facts about the world. Yeah. How big is Knoema?
So Knoema, we're a data technology company, and we provide access just on the public data side alone to about 57,000 different data sets. And if you unpack that into time series, and we're not trying to show off here, but you're talking about almost 4 billion time series. There's a lot of data. There was a great statistic that was just out. I've seen a bunch of people reference it. I think it came from IBM, where literally 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years. So you have data that's coming from all these different places and vendors that resell this data, but there's so much rich data that's just available publicly. And the challenge there is, it's available on this website, that website, in this format, embedded in this PDF, in this CSV, in this API. So the challenge is being able to take all that data, right, manage those different data pipelines. So imagine also almost like the Mississippi River in reverse, where you have all these estuaries going up instead of out, and bringing all that data into one feed. And we've been super excited about our partnership with Snowflake. We're able to bring all of these data assets into the data marketplace and make them accessible so that people can leverage data. And the nice thing about open data is that it helps to contextualize information. So if I have a particular data set, whether it has to do with understanding an investment thesis or trying to understand the competitive landscape, I'm going to leverage a whole bunch of data that's going to come from maybe it's credit card data, or maybe it's financial data, or maybe it's mobility data. Like, I'm going to leverage that. But in order to contextualize it, you need to marry that with other statistics. So if you marry that with country level statistics, information that comes from other public sources like the IMF or the OECD or all these other places where you can just grab data, it really starts to paint a really interesting picture.
You're giving people this unified experience of finding these data sets in one place, the ability to explore them. And then you have added Snowflake as an avenue for people to access the data. So can you tell me a little bit from the experience that people get going to the Knoema website and then their ability to use it through Snowflake?
I'd love to do that. So Knoema has a website, Knoema.com. It's available to all. We get somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million unique visitors every single month that come here just looking for data. So for example, here I have an example of mobile data coming from Google. Apple also offers a mobility data set. And what we capture, all the information you can capture through the API. And I'll show you examples of a series of different data assets. We capture the regional information here, rebuild the hierarchies. We can show you the indicator. But via our partnership with Snowflake, you have the ability to be able to also visit this data set within the Snowflake marketplace. So I can just click this open listing if I want, or even better, here's the actual SQL statement that I can copy, right? Hit the copy button, and then I can drop that right into my experience in Snowflake. So what we want to try to do is create a seamless experience. So if you're a non-technical user and you're looking for a very quick answer, here it is. Or if you're a non-technical user that actually wants to really dig into the data, you have an experience and opportunity to go into the Snowflake Exchange, find that data, bring it in through SQL, and then bring it out into the various workflow tools that you use, all the connectivity that the marketplace offers. So I think, there's a great stat. I like statistics. Obviously, we're a data company.
Mhm.
92% of the time that people spend on data is around making it useful, right? I have to find what I'm looking for. I have to format that somehow, bring it in. Imagine a world where I find what I'm looking for. I have an instant understanding of what the the picture is around that data, and then I can dig into all the various tools through a seamless experience in something like Snowflake. And that's what we're so excited about with our partnership with you guys. Now imagine I want to understand, I'm looking at this picture. If I were just looking at mobility data, I would say, wow, this is actually kind of a grim picture. It looks like we had, a certain level of mobility pre-COVID. Obviously numbers collapsed. There was a bit of a reversion in the summertime. And it seems that unfortunately numbers are going down. I guess cold in the Northeast has played a role there as well. But if I were to look at a different data set, so now instead of coming from Google, this data set is coming from the US Department of Commerce, right? So same experience, bringing that data in, right? Ingesting it, normalizing it, delivering it. Now I have the opportunity to see that, wow, from a GDP perspective, there's actually been a pretty big rebound. And again, I can do the exact same thing. Click this button, copy, paste, and now I'm taken directly into the Snowflake experience. So this is a nice way of looking at a data point, which paints one picture, marrying that with another data point that comes from a completely different data source. And now I have a much more contextualized view that helps me understand that while people are not as mobile as they were before, from a pure GDP perspective, we've actually been experiencing very much of a V-shaped recovery.
It's really exciting for me to know that you can jump from data set to data set, and I can take this query that you have here and bring it into my own processes. Like having a dashboard is really useful to see where things are going, to get an understanding of what the data is. But once I have this data in Snowflake, I can integrate it with everything else. I can create live dashboards that correlate to what's happening in my company.
You can also, if you think about the Snowflake experience, it's not just the Knoema data. It's I can take the Knoema data, maybe pair that with, I'll make up a provider, FactSet or S&P data. And then if I have my own data in there, I can pair that as well. And now I can really get a contextualized view across the Knoema data, other potential subscription providers, as well as my own data. And that really helps me to either reinforce an investment hypothesis. If I'm a policymaker, maybe reinforce or change my view on a decision. If I'm a private equity firm and I'm trying to understand sort of my exposures within the firm, maybe I'm trying to revisit the data picture to understand, like, what are my exposures beyond my asset exposures? Like if I own a real estate portfolio, right? How have things changed in the real estate market from a funding perspective, debt service perspective, from a housing price. So there's lots and lots of data that's immediately available that can quickly, provide you with these much more sort of like contextualized views.
What's the Knoema experience like? Where could we jump? What kind of data can we find here?
So why don't we look to maybe tell a story, right? I think one of the nice things about data is you can really pair together a lot of different data assets to help you tell a story, right? So if you think about the the pandemic and what we've gone through, right, over the last year or so, where our lives were dramatically changed, right? We saw a massive change in things like small business revenue, right? So if I wanted to look for small business revenue, I could start to look here, and this comes from, the Harvard University tracker, and you can see where small business revenue was, and I believe this is some kind of index, and where we are today. So you can see a significant dip in what's been happening on the small business revenue side. So as evidenced by what we've been hearing in the media, a lot of policymakers have had to have a very significant response. So that response has happened through fiscal stimulus and also debt monetization, right? So maybe we want to ask the question from a debt monetization perspective, right? What has maybe happened to the supply of money, right? So we can start to ask those questions. We can either type them in Knoema. I happen to already have had pull this up. So I cheated a little bit ahead of today. But, again, I can pull this up, and now I can look at like the M1 money supply, and I can instantly see that, like, wow, through the pandemic alone, you've seen a gigantic increase in the money supply. So now you have to ask the question, well, has that had any kind of inflationary impact? And if it has had an inflationary impact, who are the people that are being impacted? Is it consumers? Is it debt holders? Does it have any collateral impact to other people in other countries? The US may have been most impacted from actual deaths and perspective and number of cases, which is unfortunate. But like, what impact has this kind of stimulus had maybe on like things like food prices? And then who are the consumers of those foods, and how have they been impacted? So we can start to unpack all of these stories, and we can start to ask all of these questions, right? And that's the nice thing about data, is one data point, like we all think divergently, right? We all learn divergently. We start with one thing, and by learning, it leads us to a whole bunch of other things. So we can start to ask the question, well, if money supply has gone up, what else has possibly been affected? So I don't know. Why don't we maybe look at something like policy rates? What has happened to rates, right? Well, as we all know, in order to be accommodative, central banks across the world, here we have China, the US, the United Kingdom, the Euro area, Japan. Japan has always sort of had historically low rates. But if you look at, places like the US and China and others, right, everyone's had to aggressively lower rates in order to sort of react to what's happened in during the crisis. And again, what's nice about the integration we have with Snowflake, I can bring this right into I can copy paste this, I can drop this right into my Snowflake experience. But then I have to ask the question, okay, now that rates are much lower, right, we've seen them at historical lows, what else has been impacted? Maybe we should ask the question about housing, right? Most of us are homeowners, or we all have some degree of like home ownership, right? Or exposure to the housing sector. So what does that mean from a housing perspective? And what has that done? So maybe we should talk about home sales. If interest rates are cheaper, right? Has that increased, right, the housing sales? And you can see here that relative to where we were in 2010, even to where we were in 2020, the median price for a house has gone up dramatically. I'm sorry, this is number of one-family houses sold, business activity. So these numbers have gone up dramatically, right, in a very, very short period of time. Then we can start to ask the question, well, if housing sales have gone up, what has that done to housing prices, right? So again, using the same Knoema data, and I'm going to a different data set now. I'm going to the Federal Reserve Bank, right? You can see here that housing prices have actually gone up again. We were right at the start of COVID, median housing prices were $329. Now we're at $346. So that looks like about a, what is that? Almost like a 15% increase year over year. Is that right? So, you're talking about a substantial increase there. And then we can ask ourselves other questions like, okay, what has this done to the debt burden, right? If interest rates have gone down, has the debt burden gone up or down? So we can unpack this further and further and further. And each one of these data sets exists within Knoema, but it also exists within Snowflake. So, here in Knoema, I can see all the dimensions of the data, all the different time series, what's available to me, the hierarchies that are available. And again, I can simply bring this right into my Snowflake experience by copy pasting this query and then dropping it right into my Snowflake. So you can see here that mortgage debt service payments as a percentage of disposable income has actually dropped considerably in the last 10 years, and even dropped since the pandemic has started. And I think one of the frightening numbers here is talking about housing supply. So if we look at the housing supply in the US, we can see here that housing supply numbers are actually the lowest they've been, since 1963. So, you can see here where we were before the crisis and where we are now in the crisis. So we are literally at almost 40-year lows. So is that due to the crisis? Is that due to easy money? I'll leave that to folks that are much smarter than me to figure out. But look at the story we were able to cobble together by simply bringing together a few data sets. And imagine doing this all in Snowflake, where you can combine all these data sets, create visualizations, and share that information across your organization.
I know this is crazy. You just went like from indicator to indicator to indicator.
Yeah.
And you were able to build the story just by browsing Knoema, finding data sets that would be relevant, and you found the information there.
Correct.
And that's experience that most people have. And for me, it's really cool to have this website to find information. And then when I want to operationalize it, I can bring the queries into my Snowflake processes.
Right.
So let's quickly show people how we would run this query in Snowflake. Maybe you can send me the query.
Why don't we use the housing price one? Here you go.
Perfect. Let's see what happens. So I can go to find data. I can go to the marketplace. And once I'm in the marketplace, I can search for the Knoema datasets.
That's right.
And the first thing that people will notice is that we have them aggregated in many different categories. As you can tell me a little bit, like we have the National Accounts Data Atlas, Government Finance Data Atlas, Aerospace. How do these groupings work?
Yeah, so we've provided Snowflake with, I think it's like 8 to 10 different categories, which span. So if you think about public data, there's a lot of publicly available data that's out there. They come from, source data like the IMF, the OECD, the World Bank. There's also data out there on agricultural prices. There are municipalities that publish data. You have Johns Hopkins data, right? So there's environmental data, there's health data, there's economic data, there's financial data, right? We have all these different data assets that are all explorable and available within the Snowflake experience.
Oh, and all of this reflects how Knoema itself is using Snowflake for its own purposes.
Yeah, I mean, we just to give you a little background on Snowflake. So we've been following Snowflake now for a couple of years, for almost 2 years. We've been aware of Snowflake and then the work that you guys have been doing, and we ourselves became a Snowflake customer last year. So we power a lot of our infrastructure is sort of powered by the Snowflake infrastructure, and then beyond our data products. We've actually built an entire wrapper, an entire experience around the Snowflake architecture. So for clients who want data that goes outside of public data, they're able to bring in all of their third-party data providers and all of the public data and any data they create and create a unified experience within the Snowflake infrastructure themselves. And then they can create their own data products if they want. Some of these data providers are able to synthesize this into derivative works that they can then share out either commercially or within the various constituencies that they serve. So it makes a really nice workflow where you have an on-ramp into Snowflake, and then you have a really great off-ramp off of Snowflake, which is either connectivity to all the different vendors, which you guys have a really robust ecosystem that you've built out, or even just from a Knoema perspective, creating an API tool that allows you to build your own applications on top of Snowflake. So, we've been really fortunate to sort of partner with everyone here at Snowflake to create some really great experiences that are very client-centric and client-focused. Because at the end of the day, it's really about just making sure clients can get the data they need, service the constituencies that they want, and make sure they're empowered to use the tools they want to use, right? Like I have gray hair, so Excel is my tool of choice, but somebody 15 years younger than me probably really wants to work in Python or R, and that experience should be just as seamless. Or somebody may want data in a Tableau visualization or some other visualization tool. I think Sisense is another data partner of yours, so a technology partner of yours. So be able to create all these experiences is kind of it's been a great journey for us just to be able to be a part of that.
And now I'm going to use the query that you gave me.
You should have a nice metadata table attached to all of these tables too, which gives you all the information about the underlying tables. Because we provide the metadata tables, we provide all the source information as well. So you should have that experience there within the Snowflake experience too.
Yeah, I have all of the information schema, and I've been using the information schema to navigate everything.
Yeah.
But then it's overwhelming how many tables you have. And here are my results. Just what you were showing me on the website. For me, what's wonderful here is that you could just give me a query. You didn't need to write the SQL. You found the data that you wanted, but you communicated with me, with the person that is using SQL and Snowflake. You could just give me a query with your selections.
I think at the end of the day, data is about telling stories, right? Like it's all about trying to understand, build a mosaic to help you understand whatever it is you're trying to understand, right? That's what we all look for data, right? And if you think about all the different users, and I highlighted some before earlier, but like when I think about the people that we work with, right? We work with the hedge fund community. So the hedge fund community oftentimes, like they're either trying to unpack an investment thesis, right, where they're pulling in data, fundamental data, alternative data, and other data assets to understand what's happening. And now because of COVID and sort of some of these exogenous shocks that have been introduced, people are turning to things like public data. So some of the things that we were just looking at, like mobility data, right, or just trying to understand the economic impact of things. We work with policymakers. You and I were chatting about home prices before and supply and demand. I mean, it's interesting to us. Maybe you're out looking to buy a new place, and I mean, I'm married with children and pretty settled into mine, so the only thing I'll be doing is refining again. But there are businesses that are built on top of understanding this. So if you can pull in all this data and build that mosaic, it starts to become really interesting and compelling. If you think about the alternate workflow, I have to go to this website, hit download. Go to that website, hit download. Oh no, that's a PDF. I need to manually type this in myself, right? Like think about what that experience is like versus now I just go to the Snowflake Marketplace. I find what I want. It's there in a very easy format that I can sort of use and embed into a whole bunch of other tools. Or I can just find it on the Knoema website, get a quick visualization, and then be taken directly into the Snowflake experience if I want to build something more robust around it. So it's a nice seamless workflow that works with both a knowledge worker, right? Somebody wants to get information, and somebody's maybe looking to build something more robust who's an enterprise worker. But I'm sorry, I'm talking way too much. Let me.
I find it wonderful how you're taking all of this together and you're making it easy for people to explore this data, find what they want. But then the step comes where people like me, like I'm not a policymaker, I'm not an economist, but if I'm pairing with someone that understands why this data is important and they want to build something bigger and they want to build models, econometrics, you as someone that understands what we're looking at, you can communicate with me through a SQL query. You don't need to write SQL. You can give me a SQL query that build the chart that you're looking at. Totally. And now I can paste this query in Snowflake. And I can go build what's important for you.
That's right. That's right. You're democratizing access to data, which I think is really, really important. Not too long ago, data was really just a data science function, right? Or researcher function. Now data is everywhere. What is that old adage? Water everywhere and not a drop to drink, right? So if you can find a way to make it consumable across like technical, non-technical users, policymakers, it's not just limited to the select few that have access to the conduits and the pipes, but you're making this accessible to every kind of data consumer. People can have a much more fact-based conversation. So I think if you can help, facilitate the access through tools like Knoema, through tools like Snowflake, and you can bring information, it just helps to, have more fact-based dialogue, have more researched point of views, all these things. You're just elevating, right, the level of conversation and the level of research that's being done. I would end on this. I would say we're just getting started. Snowflake, Knoema, right? I started this conversation by saying that 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years. That means the work that we're doing with data, the tools that we're using to interrogate data, understand data, make data a part of our conversations, right? People use the word data supply chain, but making data part of our conversations, like, we're all just getting started. And I think, having an opportunity to partner with a firm like Snowflake and have great conversations with somebody like you today, Felipe, but also to be able to work with consumers of data to help them understand what stories they need to tell, right? And how we can empower them. I think that's going to be the greatest part of this whole journey. And that's where firms like Knoema and Snowflake are, sort of, we are not, forget being uniquely qualified for a second from a technological perspective, but just having that opportunity to sit in that front row seat as all of this is going on is truly an amazing experience. That's why I'm always smiling when you see me in forums like this, because I can't tell you how exciting this opportunity is, and just how we're in the first or second inning of this thing, and just to see what this is going to look like 3 years, 5 years from now. I think it really gets me excited. So anyway, I can talk about this all day. I want to thank
No,
you. I want to thank you for having me here. I appreciate the time here today. This was a lot of fun, and I hope we get a chance to do it again in the future.
Oh yeah, thanks so much, Charles. This has been fascinating. I just want to keep going deeper and just attack other topics and learn so much. It's fascinating to hear you, how your passion for data and how you're empowering other people that love data too.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks very much, Felipe.
Thank you. Have a great day. And thank you everyone for coming to the Data Show. Hopefully we'll have some great stories from you soon. I want to hear how you're using these data sets. I want to make you, empower you to go to Snowflake, find Knoema, use these data sets, and tell us how you are bringing this data to life. Thank you very much. And
Awesome.
this was the Data Show.